because it's like sometimes the speed test is like 300 down, and then for like 10 minutes it'll just disappear, and I'm like, okay, like I'd much rather just give me like 5 down consistently. I don't need any fancy speeds.
Yeah. 5 stable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, Dave, that looks like a nice spot right there.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Really
Swing and some birds and some other things.
Very nice.
Cool.
Nice.
A garden and a hill.
What
It's got
else?
it all.
Beautiful.
No.
Nice.
LA currently, right?
Need to
Yeah.
Nice.
need a
What?
hand of some sort. I don't want to hold my damn here.
Put it on the stool.
No, I'm trying to
Gonna,
figure out
but
where do I put things? I have things everywhere.
Yes.
did it.
Everybody put
Videos
yours
on
in
my desk.
places.
Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
So CJ, do you have a studio?
No. I live with 3 other people right now. Though we're getting kicked out. In
You
June.
are?
How
Oh,
come?
yeah.
Oh yeah. Our landlords are selling the house.
Damn.
Ooh.
So I mean, I guess they found out it's worth like 900 mil, and or not 900 mil, 900,000, and they're like, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I'd kick my tenants out for that too. I'd be like,
Me too.
off you go.
Yeah, so I think they found out how much it was worth because other people sold in the neighborhood, and they're like, oh, it seems like a good time to sell.
Yeah.
And all housing is like selling above asking right now. So
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So where are you thinking of going?
I have no idea. Well, probably somewhere else in San Diego.
Right.
But we'll see. We'll see how things go.
Yeah, well,
So
if you want
when-
to do a temporary thing, let me know.
When
Either
are
week.
you kicked out?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, my
End of June. So I have
End of June.
this whole month and then the next month after that. Yeah. So yeah, we'll kind of see how things go, how things develop with that. But it is what it is. I'm just bummed I'm missing out on $700 rent.
I know.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's so nice.
It's like
I haven't
unheard
had
of good.
$700. Yeah, the last time I had $700 rent was like maybe 1999, something like that. It's been a while.
yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Who knows? Things may change. We may come back to that glorious time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure.
Yes, let's hope. Let's hope.
I don't know. High density housing all across California. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Everybody gets a coffin. Just like one of those coffin hotels, and like the coffin hotels in Japan.
Yeah, just have your sleeping pod. Yeah, I would actually be down for that. I would totally like
At
that. Actually
times, yeah.
suits my lifestyle very well right now.
Yeah. Yeah, have some like communal bike storage, and then you just slide into a pod every night.
Perfect. Community bike storage, surfboard storage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Big
I
giant
like
kitchen.
Climbing a random thing for backpacks.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
There's like 3 backpacks per like 6 pods. You have to check it out. It's like living on a submarine. It's fun.
Yeah.
What about food? Is it like Soylent based kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
While
just
you sleep, they
dispenser.
deliver it into your
Yeah.
While you sleep. Ew.
so you can optimize the rest of your day.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
you
like
you can't waste your time during the day eating.
Totally. Well, on the outside of the pod, you have like one of those hamster drip things. And you can just suckle up on it. And you get your nutrients. I think we just solved it.
So
We solved the housing crisis in America.
It's just a matter of implementation now.
Easy.
Finding funders and implementation.
Exactly. Now we just got to execute.
And maybe there's not even, you don't have to have a computer. It has shared computers too. So you just like walk up, grab a computer out the door.
that'd be nice. Just instantly switch to your profile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible,
right?
It's definitely possible. Or
possible.
use like the nice, fully integrated giant desktop. It's always there and like hooked up to power and stuff.
Yes, there you
This,
go.
this future, and then it's got some biometrical scan, and it just knows, and it boots up your last instant.
Takes your whole body.
And like, exactly. Well,
Does it
this is.
look like
I mean,
I'm
this
in
is.
a
I guess this
padded
is how the
room?
Matrix starts.
A little bit.
Just a little
like
bit.
Yeah.
Dave
We
just sent me an Instagram picture of this woman in this like giant bed, and I was like, "That's my dream, like just a whole room that's a bed." And now I'm achieving it through video camouflage.
Yeah, our office in New York had like tiny little meeting rooms, but it was like super cheap soundproof paneling. And one day I like logged onto a call and I had like an orange shirt. It straight up looked like I was in prison at that point. It was just just like I'm like here of my own will. I promise.
Yeah.
No shady business.
You're just blinking in Morse code. Help. Yeah.
How's Mexico City?
It's good. It's been basically all my writing, all my side stuff has completely like stopped. There's too much to do here. I forgot how like intense social city experiences are.
Yeah.
Which has been nice, but I am like yesterday was a complete write-off after we went out, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. Like I just laid in bed the entire day. I was recovering. And I got hit with a stomach bug like for the past week, so it's been gnarly. I'm just like constantly exhausted and hungry. Like it's been fun, but I'm like pretty much good. I'm like I need a stable bed. I need time to just like think, because between all the work stuff and moving houses and figuring out all the stuff in foreign sitting, it is there's not a lot of bandwidth left over at the end of the day at all. But it has been fun. Definitely fun.
Yeah. It's a busy city. Like there's just like stuff happening. It's nice.
Yes.
A lot of walking, like a lot of outdoor vibe. Yeah, which is cool.
Constantly active, constantly moving around. And it's not overly hot, but you're constantly chugging water because it's up there. And it's also Bardia is just, I mean, like we've hung out in person for like a couple hours before, but now we've been together for a week, like getting to know each other reasonably well, and he's just hilarious in so many ways. Like,
are you living together or
about him? No, we're just like in the same neighborhood, so we can meet up, at like 10 minutes notice. And we have another friend who I was with in Huatulco. He came here as well, and like I guess them two like hit it off pretty well because they have some similar like anarchic undertones is the only way I could put it. They're like, so
you say anarchic?
Yeah, so some very deep sense of I am not happy with the way things are, and I shall try to like make them somewhat better and not destroy them. But but they get along. They get along nicely.
Sounds like Antarctic. They're like really into like polar cold zones.
No, I think they're definitely about the heat.
About the heat, about the fire instead.
Yes.
About enacting volcanic design principles.
Reasonable.
Yeah, that's fun. Like I had some experience of this in New York, like when I got there and like found a crew of just nutcases. And it felt that same way, just bouncing around. Like, we can't keep doing this. Like, we have to lay down.
Not sustainable.
But you're like, nope.
No,
but it's a good way of learning. Like you're pushing. Well, you're pushing up against like your edges all the time, and you get to see how far you can go. It's cool.
It's funny. It makes me think of Chicago, same sort of thing, where you're like on a bender of sorts where you're seeing everybody all the time, you're like hanging out all the time, and then like things quiet down, and then someone like you get a call and they're like, all right, so this is what's happening, and you're like, no, and they're like, it's happening. And you're just like,
Yep.
I can't.
Yep.
And they're like, I'm on my way over right now.
Yep.
So there's no, and you're just like,
Yep. And they're just like,
I'll
I'm
be
bringing you a
outside your
Red Bull.
front
And you're
door.
like,
You're
God.
like, fuck.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
fun.
Yep. Yeah. So no, it's been good. I'm definitely glad. Yeah, made it out here. We'll definitely be back. Barty and I are like throwing around the most basic like idea about some sort of tools for thought, like week long bonanza here sometime late this year, where
Cool.
just invite a bunch of people and like set up a bunch of little coding like times, and obviously in the evenings people would like socialize and stuff. Because it feels like the place to do it. It's cheap. It's pretty central.
Yeah.
And nobody would have any like visa restrictions to get in. So
Yep.
we'll definitely keep you all updated on that. But I think it
cool.
would be pretty fun.
Nice.
Very fun.
That sounds dope.
How about you two? How's LA?
It's a big city, which I learned. I've been here a few times, and now I'm like, I've always
Relearning.
been, like relearning, and because I've always been closer to the ocean, and now we're like inland, and it's just crazy. I'm like, this is a city, and Dave's like, what the fuck did you think it was? And I'm like, I don't like. So San Diego is a city, but it's like there's other cities or towns or whatever you want to call, like they bleed together a little bit, but this is like just urban. Like it just keeps going and going and there's no breaks between. Yeah. So I don't know. Like that's cool. Like I don't know why I didn't think it was like that, but getting to like re-experience that. We walked from, so we're staying in Echo Park, I think it's called, or maybe Elysian something. It's close to the Elysian. I think it's called Elysian Park. Which is huge. It's like this giant city park, hilly, good views of downtown. It's really pretty over here.
Yeah, I think I may have it's like a couple hikes that go all the way at the top, and there's like a nursery down near the bottom, or
Maybe?
a couple, maybe near the top. But yeah, I think my friends took me there last time I was there, and I was like, whoa, like it's an oasis of like green.
Yeah, we're
weird.
right at the base of one of the sides of it. It's great. It's so you can just pop over into some nature. And like, there's a bunch of good walking like paths. You can string them together, which is good for thinking. It's great. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we walked to Silver
it's
Lake
fun.
the first 2 days that we were here because we have a friend that's there. And it's kind of a hike, like an hour walk, but that's where I was just like, oh, okay. So it just keeps going, and then you start. It feels like Mexico City a little bit. Like the weather is somewhat similar. It's green. It's the graphical sort of signage. Like I didn't have my camera either time, and I'm just like, oh, I want my camera. I want to take pictures of everything. Yeah, which is fun.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, and there's also a quality, like the people we're staying with were friends of the music community that I came up in. We didn't know this at first though. Like we rented the thing through Airbnb, and then she asked Kristen, and then it was one of these things. Tiny world. Yeah, and like he's guy Ben, he's like a audio engineer. He works for I think Yamaha, making like certain pedals or whatever for like all the rock stars. And my friends in this band Thrice like use their equipment, and it's and they've like slept on the floor in here, and like it's like, so it's this weird thing, and they're part of the like sort of distributed network of people who like live outside the systems, and like that I came up in. So and I forget, this block is just full of artists, like writers and musicians and this kind of thing. And yeah, I'm like very comfortable in that environment. LA has a lot of this. So there's a lot of characters here.
And fashion.
So
the fashion gets me. I'm just like taking it all in all the time. And I like my biggest obsession is it started in San Diego, but the spandex shorts that girls wear, They're like varying lengths. They're like either like booty shorts where they're like super short, like volleyball, and you're just like, okay, like I don't know how you have the balls to wear that, but that's cool. Or the ones that are like knee length or thigh high, but everyone is wearing them everywhere. And I'm just like, I might have to buy a pair just so I can know what it's like to be walking around in these shorts all the time.
Gotta be a local.
Me too.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah, you too.
Dave.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
we ran into a guy that was wearing shorts like that.
Yeah.
Like, and he was friends with our friend Eddie at this coffee shop. So he's like talking to us, and I saw him walk by, and I'm like, what is this man doing? And then he's talking to us, and I'm just like, LA is wild. Like, people are just like, anything goes with fashion right now, which is super liberating. You're just kind of like, okay, so that means you could do whatever you want. Like, that's kind of fun. Yeah.
Also, LA just, whenever I'm there, I'm just like, holy moly, like people here are just so fit. Like everybody's like, well, you know, like they're obviously there because of the beach and all the gyms and stuff. It totally reminds me of Soho in New York, where I walked through and I'm just like, it's a very different neighborhood than like the rest.
I mean, this was felt like that was my experience. My first apartment was in Soho in New York, and our office was there. And I'm just like, these people are not part of the same species as me. Like it made me so angry at first. I'm just like, no one was telling me about this. I'm like wandering around the city like a troll. It's just it's ridiculous. Yeah, you get used to it, and then you get to meet them, and they live a very weird life. But yeah, there's a definite version of that here. Like people for whom like their outward appearance is like been how they make their living, or like image is a big thing. It comes with its pitfalls. But some of those people are fascinating because they're extremely entertaining, and like they're good company if you can get into the flow with them. So yeah, it's nice. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I was like pretty resistant to coming out here. Like, I don't know why. I'd spent a lot of time coming here. Like, I lived in Vegas for a while, and we would come out to basically see shows and hang out because the culture in Vegas was non-existent. So outside of the stuff that we made, but bigger bands, or like all our friends lived at the beach where they could, this kind of thing. Yeah, and I don't know, the sort of the driving culture and like congestion and that kind of thing. Like I didn't experience any sort of the like sleepier neighborhoods like near a park. Like for whatever reason, it just never happened. So even in like Silver Lake, we would sort of stick to the main drags and stuff. Because that's where everything was happening. So it's been nice staying in like a neighborhood, like where people have set up shop. So changing my perspective on the thing.
We also have noticed that if you are a good guest of a place, and I definitely a good guest of a place, people are recruiting you. They're like, you should move here. People like, you should be here, and we're like, oh really? So it's kind of nice, like it's like flattering, cool. Like you feel welcomed. But we like don't have any intentions of like settling down, so it's like interesting because you're like, I was kind of bummed leaving San Diego because it was so great, and then we came here and I was sort of like, ugh, and then now I'm like, oh, this is kind of nice, like we're getting welcomed again. And it's beautiful, and there's this to do and like new things to see, so it'd be interesting to see over time how this plays out. Like I have no idea. It's a very strange way of living.
Yeah, it's very different to how a lot of places are framed, where they're like exclusionary and just like, no, stay out. Like we already have something here. Like we don't need more people. We don't want more people. But to be like directly sort of like given that little entryway in, that's really sweet. Like I like, and I think for a lot of the country just doesn't even apply, because like you wouldn't even meet most of these people anyway, and everybody's after like little bubbles, and they're just like, all right, you can move in, you can not, like it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that came up recently we've been, because, you know, we're a couple, like, this is our second stay in the nomadic thing, right? Like, I've done, the versions I've done of this are like splitting time between Chicago and New York, right? Like over a couple, 3 years, something like that. And then doing lots of travel during, but I had like multiple home bases and then one home base and jumping off of, but never really, except for like just after high school, didn't live anywhere particularly, just sort of couch surfed and this kind of, you know, and now we're, you know, this instantiation is like, you know, you're mobile with your locus of home, right? Or it's distributed. And it's distributed in the network, like what we're doing here, right? And you were taking with you a sort of, again, this is like coming online slowly, like a relationship to place that is transmutable or whatever. And there's a definite like grieving process in the change of home or something, like and like letting go and picking up again, you know, this kind of thing. And like both Kristen and I have like experienced different versions of this. When I was in San Diego, I was having a hard time with it, getting settled and figuring it out. And yeah, it was coming out in weird ways, you know, I was feeling pretty sick and, you know, and here I feel a lot more comfortable with the thing. Like, I'm just like, okay. Parts of it I liked a lot. I liked being out of a house. I liked being like, you know, mobile and light on my feet and this kind of thing. But yeah, so that's filling in a little bit. It's still got a long ways to go. Like, it feels like the very beginning of an understanding. But yeah, that's been interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that definitely lines up with some of the feelings I've been getting as well. Like my first couple days in the place, I'm like this is cool, but it's like so hard. There's just so much going on. Like, how am I ever just going to like absorb all of this? And then you're leaving, and you're like, very different. Like, you're gonna miss this place. There's like a piece of this place that has become me, and a part of me that has become this place. And coming back to it will only build onto that. But it's not a given. It's not easy. Like you know, there's like this grinding that happens. So I definitely relate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's some sort of like it's forming relationships in a different way to place and people. That for me is I mean, it's familiar, right? Like the other thing I ran into recently was Eric McLuhan, Marsha McLuhan's son, and they worked together for a while on this. Like, a big part of their work was like the concept of media ecology, and like sort of understanding the media environment and how it's, you know, it's got parallels with like the natural environment, you know, pollutions and these kinds of things or whatever, and then understanding what relation to like all of these kinds of things. And part of this has they're pretty observant, I guess, in like patterns of human behavior. And one of the things he had is like a sort of a noticing, I guess, that he was developing. He died a few years ago. Was the concept of nomadicism becoming like primary again, and like seeing it in like people jogging, like all of a sudden people are running around all over the place and they're carrying water bottles, like, you know, like, which these kinds of things. And so I've been trying to sort of use this lens to, you know, like what allows for like a nomadic thought and a nomadic publishing, and like what is being mobile in your homing due to the way you see the world with people. Fun lens, like seeing what like home ownership is within, you know, and how the distinction between that and the ability to move, and, you know, anyways, why this tendency is coming about, and these kinds of things. Anyways, open stuff. It's been, yeah.
What does nomadic mean in this context?
In
The McLuhan, Eric is his name?
Yeah, I think I need to study it a bit more, but I mean, so I think he's pulling from the sort of, you can see like the evolutionary period where we were hunting and gathering, and that's how he came to it. So through the real quick, the information ecology, and how we have moved from like a sort of material, physical ethos into an informational ethos. And now this is, you can explain the knowledge boom and the abstraction boom and all these things, and how what is important is hunting and gathering information. Which is so you get this movement through that, and staying in one place is it's too big, it's too uncertain, so we have to create these new methodologies of movement.
Oh, that is really interesting.
It's interesting too, from the perspective of actual physical nomadicism, because right now the information landscape via the internet is not good for collecting like actual like quality information. So you literally need to go somewhere and be like, what is happening here, and talk to people and sort of like embed.
That actually reminds me, CJ, do you remember we were
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Towards Tahoe, somewhere up in the foothills? And like we were literally like bumped into somebody like, how do we access like the information here? How do we like is it next door? Is it Facebook groups? Like what are these Facebook groups? Is it mailing lists? And it's weird that you like can't get to it from the outside. You have to have this geospatial like proof that you're there to get access to it. But that also makes it very difficult, very exclusive. And not always intentionally. I think, there's information flying out in the world that it's just extra information that you're putting out to try to like direct it back. If everybody was trying to publish everything globally, publicly available, like the internet would be even more chaotic. I think maybe right now at our sense, we do need some level of like filtering, but I
curation.
Really like the nomadic information angle here.
The whole gathering information through nomadicism. Oh, that was like on point.
The hunting thing really gets me. I'm like, this is, I mean, that's what it feels like. You get the scent of something, and you're tracking things, and you need to do it in a group, and you need to coordinate, and you're doing sense making to see where in the environment you are. And this is a very collaborative, like, improvisational methodology. So I don't know, like that speaks to how I like to work on certain things, and it's exciting and terrifying. And then we're in the state where part of that nomadicism early days was probably like you're going into new territories for whatever reason. You're being driven by resource or the need to explore, because that's what you do. And sometimes you're going to run into things like a saber-toothed tiger or a woolly mammoth, and you're like, what the hell is this thing? And you have to like reorient and tool and like come up with systems to encounter environment, which is you're doing this in uncertainty. So I don't know, I love all that. It's ridiculous.
And there's something about like what artifacts do you leave behind for the people that come after you, and for your next return visit. Like just having Kristen send me over y'all's like pinpoints for Google Maps for like places in Mexico City, which a few of which I've hit up, but also there's been like maps on top of like, oh, that place looks interesting, let's just go there. But I wish it were easier to just be like, I have like taken this past point of your like geospatial journey, and I've like made a connection to it. Like, here's what I thought. And then, but like, don't let it be limited to where, you send me it. And then like, how could I like pass that on to somebody else? So really, really what we need to do is just annotate like our places and just have that. Because that way, like it stays there. And I think it would be very exhausting to ask every single person I know every single time I'm going to a new location, right? It's just like completely
Where should I
unscalable.
go?
Versus,
Yeah.
right. Versus, oh, like that coffee shop, you like been there 3 times and you left a note. And I'm like, and not only a note, but like you also tied the work that you produced at that coffee shop to that location
cool.
as well. And like you can discover what you were thinking about like 3 years ago.
It adds so much more depth to that place and the whole thing. Like if you can build that context.
Yeah.
And I mean, you also start to see gravity wells for certain types of thought, which means that, you know, if you are being pulled towards a certain gravity, there is a topical area or you know, like this is scenes can develop. And if you can sniff your way towards the scenes, you can be more effective because you are aligning with interest and you are more likely to be somebody who can participate, you know, from that place. That's cool. I like the geographic part of that.
Yeah, actually this whole scenes thing is like really interesting to me because it's almost making the scene more visible as opposed to like it, like finding a space on the internet. I find can be like quite challenging. Like you might develop a scene over time, but it's actually much easier to find a scene in person. And it's like that's adding another layer of, oh, like here's like an invisible internet scene behind this place that, you know, like kind of exists, and you can really hone in. Like that coffee shop might have, like, it could all start with just the vibe of the coffee shop, and people are like thinking about the vibe of the coffee shop, and that's bringing about certain thoughts, which is like now creating a scene of that place, which is
it's like
super interesting. Yeah. And you'll kind of, I guess, naturally find like you'll find similar people and in that area, or like more naturally you'll find those people who have like similar patterns, and maybe there's still like subgroups within that, but you're like, oh, like there's all these groups here.
It's like a waypoint that gets you like visibility into the next couple and how they relate to each other. Absolutely.
Yeah, this kind of brings up, like, Kristen and I have been doing a bunch of work on we were just talking about how even to introduce this to you guys, because we haven't talked to anybody else about it really. Kind of on the heels of some of the stuff we were working on, CJ, and some of our it's all interrelated with all of this stuff, which is the like general principle of relationship being primary, and moving again from San Diego helped like sort of shake this up a little. I'll sort of just try to sketch out like where we're at and like I don't know, go from there. I don't know how to even, the thing is enormous. So basically the generalized concept that we're working with is the idea of an operating system, like, and I'm for now calling it relational OS. And so I've been poking around a lot of the sort of blockchain stuff, like just cursory still, trying to get a feeling for the philosophy and the sort of ethos and all this kind of stuff. And then on top of that, like sort of poking around how graph databases work, and the differences between relational databases, which are misnamed, in my opinion. And then what sort of keyed this off was our Frame.io experiment, and specifically the annotating sound, like voice. And I've started experimenting with, I'm just using all of this to key up how to think about this. I've started experimenting with voice notes at the point of insight. So I have something that's bubbling up, and I had a deep desire to like call CJ or call John to talk about the technical implications, or get in touch with Kristen like immediately, like at that moment. And I'm like, it's not possible. Everybody's doing things, right? In the async sense. So I'm like, also, I don't trust that initial insight, like, because it's so exciting. It's hard to, it's hard to step back from that stuff. So anyways, I started recording these things, and like then immediately listening back to them, and then there is this layer of uncertainty and all of these things. This is the related to the comment about Kristen's voice filling in. There is a tonal quality to understanding that you can hear with listening practice or whatever. And in my own voice, if I listen back to it, I've listened to my own voice a lot. So I'm like, oh, right there, you're missing a component. Like, you need to research further within this area. So anyways, and I'm like, I would really like to have a place where I could, we've talked about this, capture this kind of information and then be able to provide it to other people, but not in a feed, not in something that you have to take a look at this. So that's one piece of it. Then we've been playing these games, right? And the games have a ton of potential in creating these shared contexts and stuff. And this sort of brought about an understanding that like an operating system that is premised on games, rather that like sort of role playing, the concept of play rather than work. So, or not rather than, but on a continuum between work and play, the distinction between those things. And what is an operating system that is oriented towards play, that is inviting, yeah. So there's some of that stuff in there. Where else am I missing here, Kristen? I mean, I'm missing a whole bunch, but where do I go?
The only thing, communications layer, like the
So the layering,
community, social network,
so basically I am we have like there are layers to an operating system effectively, and okay, one of the principles behind this thing is like what if the operating system was collaborative natively? Like the idea that this is there are constraints in the environment that are based on query, probably more than anything. So like here's a little vision that might help. The idea that the four of us are sharing a file system, sharing an environment, we are able to independently like capture thinking in whatever input methodology we need to, audio, video, drawing, whatever the inputs go in. We have and again, I have a limited understanding of how graph databases work, right? And I'm using just the sort of topology I understand. But the idea that like sort of there is a query that says, show me all of Dave's stuff, right? And so there is and that is my perspective on the whole, right? And you've got these different components that are all of my files, right? That's fine. You need this layer of file exploration and all this other stuff. But the work that is being done in the relational OS is basically a sort of, one of the ways of looking at it is a group sense making thing, and it's multiperspectival. So how are we trading perspectives using things like the black box games? There's probably a bunch of componentry on this to enter into different styles of play to better sense in the problem space that we are trying to play, and having these things be portable in some way, non-destructive, remixable, and all this stuff. So there's an interface in this that is starting to develop that is pulling from a lot of what we have with all the lists in the UI and stuff, but fundamentally graph up and the way that you move through information this way, anyways, I don't know, like this is where I think we have the sketch enough of the componentry here, and I'm not laying it out very well because it's still too big for me to do that, to like write a paper. So I don't know. I can see this thing, and the way the organizational structure for building something like this needs to be open, with a particular kind of ethos. But this aligns with like if we can get the broad strokes of how this thing works, I think the technical aspects are here. I think the funding aspects are here with the blockchain stuff, right? I think the relational aspect is coming online, like this gaming concept, like there's a bunch of these things that are aligning, but they need filling in and like reordering, like, because I have like a loose structure here, but it's sketchy. So anyhow, that's where I'm at right now. I don't know if any of that resonates.
No, that's awesome. And yes, like I think there's like soft kind of like vague spots that obviously, like, just in terms of your explanation, but I think the perspective thing where you like show me through Dave's lens makes a lot of sense, because it's all of it's already open. I can look at things you've created from my point of view, but I could also like inhabit your point of view and just see everything, because you've created everything to be open already. And like just doing that isn't necessarily enough, because it's just like a bunch of stuff out there.
Exactly.
I guess like this is what this is adding is also like the way it's arranged relative to me, and like what are the other connections to your set of things, and how like can I see something from two people's perspective at once and blend the two? And yes, I'm getting that, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, and then this comes on the heels of somebody I was listening to recently, woman named Lisa Norton, who is like a long-term design practitioner and is thinking about the ethos of design and the philosophy of design and these kinds of things. And one of the things she's talked about was design is helping people sense make effectively. So
that seems pretty apt.
I like that as a sort of method of tooling, right? So there are broader implications here of like a system, like a game building system that has development as part of its concept, like personal development. So the idea of like, building apps, right? Games, apps being like equivalent in structure, in the relational operating system, a game is equivalent to an app. And those having like levels of play, and the levels of play are instructive in how to play. So if you have like, say, and we've been sort of talking about these things in terms of perspectives, like there are certain sort of formulaic perspectives or ways of seeing the world that could be enactable, right, in groups with different styles of play. This is the sort of educational layer within this whole thing. Anyway, part of this is good because I can see how little I have this filled in.
That's okay. It's not supposed to be filled in. You have to start somewhere. So
I mean, it feels nice where there's a lot of room to experiment in this stuff.
You're slowing down. Like he gets sometimes, like we talked about this before, I'm like, just go slow, because when this kind of information is coming out, like if you're excited about it, oftentimes it's just like getting it out, but it's hard to on ramp to then. So that was nice. It was paced, which is interesting because then I can get like a new perspective on it, even though we've been talking about this nonstop. So one of the things, because John chimed in, and then that like having his, like, boy, it's interesting. So one of the things that popped into my head was like garbage in, garbage out. And I think the reason why this is operations system level, because you can't use the existing operating systems, because of what you are creating in those systems is like foundationally not the kind of content produced in such a way that we're not interested in it. Because when what happens now it's not related to the relationships, the vectors, to the nodes. Like that's what's, I mean, this is all graph language too. Like what's interesting, what's more important, and I wrote this somewhere, so I should just read it. The content is less important than the response or relationship to the content. But if the operating system is not designed for that, you're not going to be able to capture that. So you're going to be constantly trying to like fit into something that doesn't work. So that's interesting, because part of what was hard for me for a little while, like a few days here, I'm just like, I don't know what an operating system is, because I'm not like, I don't, the computer science and like how you build like these kinds of systems. And I didn't go research it. I'm just like waiting for it to emerge. So it's starting to fill out a little bit for me. Like I still don't have like the total sense of it, but this is where I'm like, okay, you can't use the old system because it's producing things in like the wrong way, or a way that we don't want to play with. So you have to build it from the ground up differently, which would mean a different system. Got it?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
On the operating system.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. CJ.
Yeah, I want to hear CJ.
Yeah, no, I think so. I guess, Kristen, when you're saying like the content is less important than like the response or the relationship, it's kind of like these things are getting like very jumbled in my head, in the sense like a response is also a piece of content. So then like what does that mean? Or is it really just saying that like the relationships themselves are adding value? It's not that the content itself is not valuable, because it, like, if it exists in and of itself on its own as a standalone thing, that is probably not so valuable. But once it's built on top of it, it is. But really, like, once it's bootstrapped to any extent, like the amount of like unconnected nodes will be very little, ideally, right? Like everything should have a lot of relationships to everything else. And that's like where the value is. And it's the fact that right now we have a bunch of files that are just like files on our computer, as opposed to being connected to other things. Is that kind of like the difference in relationship that I was like trying to make?
Yeah, I think it's the context, like ecosystem thing. So the content in and of itself, it has value inherently. It's saying something, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But what's interesting about it, and what's more valuable, and what we're trying to suss out here, is what the response is to that, and it will vary depending on what the context is. So you could have something like the Rupert Spira meditation, and on its own, like that's crazy valuable, right? You could have someone write a post about it in response to it, and then in that context, like that relationship, I mean, and then that produces another piece of content, but it means something. But then if we did something like what we did with the audio, and then like the layers on top of that, we're creating new context. So which gives it, I don't know if this is like a portal into like a multi-perspectival. You're getting a more whole view of what that thing is. I mean, like you can't ever know what something is like fully. Pull in Rupert Spira here, like you do know what it is, like it is awareness, right? Like, and you can kind of feel into like what the properties of that might be from that perspective. But the point, like the whole point of this, I think, is that it's really hard to see where other people are coming from, and how other ways of looking at things, because we're so used to how we see things, and that is like crazy. It inhibits connection. It inhibits collaboration. We're like trying to kill each other, or like, fence each other out all the time. Why are we doing that? Like, we are not like, and then like, this is again, back to Rupert Spira, like our experience and what we are is an infinite, borderless like experience. Why are we putting up borders? Why are we doing like, I don't want to compute like that. Like if we can remove as much as possible, that would be nice, like as a starting point. to sort of reinforce what we already are. Like you can't do it perfectly, but
yeah, I mean, they're graceful constraints. Like
yeah, intentional constraints, like
so
looking at them with this new lens. And this is why it's a totally separate thing than what we're used to seeing with computing, I think. We're not computing.
Yeah, there's
multi-creation or like
software, I guess. Yeah.
Well, the thing that underlies that, going all the way back to like Cartesian thinking or whatever, right? Like, you know, to separating form and function and spirit, and like if you rejigger these things around something that is a little bit more Eastern in mentality, that is, you know, everything is flows between each other, and there is information in the flows, right? And so this is like money is becoming like this. So money used to be a tangible physical thing, and there's a scarcity of it, and then, you know, it's tokenized or whatever in that way. Now money can be a representation of flow and a representation of value, moving across things. So being able to sense make in the information field is a way to sense what is valuable, what is relevant, and having tooling and lensing, like building lenses so that you can see things indirectly, things that are outside of your current view, requires you know, this, and being able to be together and look at the thing from different angles in a sort of fluid way. And this is where like moving through an information landscape by means of navigating relationship is far more effective, I think, at sense making than looking at individual blocks of stuff individually, you know, separate from the whole, and then having to extrapolate outwards. So yeah, the environment will help you. Yeah, but this is how tools work, right? Your tooling will limit or constrain what you can do in the world. So I think we can just build tools around this methodology. A lot of tooling can be built in this like we're conscious of how this stuff works now to some degree. Yeah. John, you were going to say something 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. So I mean, things come and go. One thing is, somebody posted a tweet today, which is like, when you think operating system, what do you think? And there was like several pull options, pile of files, pile of functions, or like a couple others. And, you know, I was just like, shit, I'm not sure. Like, this is actually kind of like, you know, it's like the operating system. Sure, we know what it is. It comes in a box, you install it. But then it's like, but what is now that we have phones and internet web apps and cloud providers, it's really starting to get blurry as it is. And so, I mean, this is just removing it one layer further and saying, like, it's actually about the media and not the like specific code that's running. It's not even about the media. It's more about like the things that you're producing with and for each other, at just like a very, very, very low level. And Kristen, you sort of mentioning, you know, like how we can't know something like another piece of knowledge fully, like this meditation, right? Like we experienced the meditation, and then the file that we generated from our experience of it is a way of understanding that thing better, but it also helps us understand each other better, and this active understanding better, and many other things. But like there's something about that I like, in the sense that somebody else will do the same thing, and now you have two like parallel ways of looking at it. And yes, you're still never going to get like as close as, you know, 100%, but you get closer and more accurate. And again, accurate is like not even the right word here, because it's like implies that there's inaccurate, but you have more data points of some sort. You can kind of like start to put them together and switch between them and remix them. And I think that's that definitely gets
that. On the user side of this, like when you have the ability to access other people's points of view, and that's what these media artifacts represent, and they're in relation to where they came from and where they're going and how they fit, to the degree that you have those relationships. And within the graph model, relationships are cheap, make lots of them, right? what you can hear in this is the voices that sort of ring out to you, that they are saying something that you need to hear, and you can see how they got there and where they are in relation to other people, which means that you can more closely relate to them in depth, right? Which provides stronger bonding, which helps you see the world more clearly. So if the operating system in which you're operating doesn't allow for that, or like is more oriented towards transaction or quick, exchange or something like this, you're going to produce things that are more oriented towards transaction and quick exchange. But if you were in an environment,
Totally.
yeah. So, and what can you do with that? I mean, its implications are across every field of knowledge and knowing and being. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of it is, I mean, this is the social worker in me, and also the like part of me that understands the non-dualism. Like when I was first exposed to that specific meditation, I was like, I think I told you I started crying because I was like, this is how I've been seeing the world, but I didn't have any way of knowing that and like he's articulating it. It helps people to not see each other as other, because we are not. We are not that. And it's so like you can't teach it in a traditional, like it's not like, I don't know if the word didactic is right here, but the traditional ways of like sharing knowledge, it's not knowledge share, it's enacted. You have to like participate in a way of thinking and being. How do you do that? You have to do it. So that's, I mean, that's the sort of more philosophical, spiritual like side of, I think, what we want to build. I don't know. Not that I would necessarily pitch it that way.
Things, they need ethos though. Like if there is not an ethical, like what is the ethical grounding for the environment that you're operating in? How do you know it? Like, how do you talk about it? Is that part of your practice?
Well, like, part of it, like you brought up the Cartesian and then like flows of information. There is like a bit of an East meets West right? So this is the Hegelian, what is that called? Dialectic theory. Like, so something emerges when you bring them together, because it's not that you throw out the Cartesian, you don't throw out the code, you don't throw out the content, you keep all of that. But it's you're looking at it in a different way. It's serving a different purpose. It's like, I mean, definitely like the Cartesian, like in my mind, it feels sort of like building blocks or something where you can, what it's doing, especially like with money and information, is creating channels so things can flow through them. And then what we're talking about is some, hopefully, like preferably some sort of transcendence of those two things, and like what emerges when that all comes together.
And the games underlie all this. Like there is an entire practice of gameplay, like which you are offering to users or players of the game, that will help them see themselves or each other or some facet of the world. And it's collaborative and fun, ideally.
Of course.
Enacted.
The games, though, is a very, very powerful, I'm not even sure if metaphor is the right word, because they literally are. It's not even like a game. It is a game in the sense that a game is just a suggested set of it's a sequence of like steps to take with oneself or others, right? In hopes of whatever, right? Like it's so open-ended that you can just like make it fit really anything. And the idea of just like being able to say, oh, I played these 4 games with these 3 other people, and here's how I like now think about this. Like, do you want to try also like taking, something like that we put into, like, use this as an input to those games and try it together, or do you want to like take the output of our games and use that as an, like, it's like almost
Totally.
infinitely restackable and customizable. But I guess games as an underlying verb for creation, I guess, is really, really, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's an entire operating system where you play games and collectively,
yeah,
which is all we're doing, right? So like
exactly.
that's what work looks like. Like you show up and like, what kind of fun game can we design to see the world? Like, we know that there is something out there, right? How can we use like this black box widget and this other thing and this sequence of events to sense into this thing, whatever this thing is that the four of us know, right? Or this other four, or this 12, or whatever group it is. And then how can we then, with the game lens that we've built, offer that so other people can play it and find similar things or different things, whatever they're trying to do. And then how can we teach what this is seeing and like how to play? What kind of role do you need to be in? What kind of like what is best suitable? How can you grow your individual practices to play more advanced games? Because there is a novice to advanced like level on this thing, right? So yeah, I don't know. This stuff breaks down into, we can write it down. I mean, we're at the place where we can do this.
One of the things that just popped into my head is the gameplay is based on primitives. So if you have like this sort of distilled sort of this is the recipe card. A game is a recipe card and the ingredients are primitives. So if people, and there's like ways to stick things together so you can make your own games. Like it's that easy. Like
and
we were talking about this. Like what if you had an issue with someone that you were renting like part of their house from, you're staying with them? Like what if we had an issue with the Airbnb host? How would you talk to them in this like new operating system? What kind of, and you could go like, let's build a game. Let's say that we met on this like through this like operating system, so they understand some of the fundamentals. So we propose a game, you know, like for let's see
proposal
where this
to play. I mean, and being able to get information that way that's not too antagonistic, because you're not like, that's not the goal. The goal is just, and like Dave and I were role playing this earlier. Part of it is sort of, you could preface it like, I was triggered by something and it is not necessarily you, it's me, but like, would you be willing to play this game? So I would like to learn from this experience. If you're game.
Yeah, like a shared language, sort of, but getting at something a little deeper than the shared language. Because I had a similar situation. I mean, we had no like real conflicts, but the guy I was renting the previous place was from, you know, barely spoke English. Mostly we were like doing this live with Google Translate audio, like as we were talking to each other and figuring out money. And we cut out Airbnb out of the deal, so now it's like straight up two people like undergoing a financial exchange of housing for money, and it's just like, you know, I at some point it hit me. I had this money laid out on the table. Like he could barely understand me, I could barely understand him, but we made it work. Like because like we obviously know that we have aligned incentives here. It was a reasonably like open space where, you know, neither of us is like nefarious. But if there were like a suggested you know, flow for this process, I would have been made maybe a little easier. Certainly, it would have involved less
and like and if there was a system to experiment with these flows and then have counterparties play them and see in the ones that work get bubbled up and be like, hey, this one works pretty well, you should try this for X, and go ahead and try it. Like it speaks for itself, and then you know, build it.
There's no cost. It's just open. You just
and like this is, I think this is where. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quickly. It seems like just the way, I guess this specific example of housing is just like, oh, like if you do this, this lends itself very nicely to defining a smart contract very precisely.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. It's literally like the outputs of this game become the thing itself, right? It just literally one to one.
So this is where I was thinking about, like, there is a software layer that is off chain effectively, where you can prototype these things, play these games.
Yep.
And then when something looks to be chainable, you have these games that can write to chain, right? And so you need an operating system to create the software and infrastructure to be able to play these kinds of things, to create the entire layer of existence that we're now moving into. So I'm underselling it.
This also, I mean, like, at least ties in with like the stuff Sharuz is doing, I feel like, very nicely in terms of he's already built, like, at least from the code that I've seen in his repo, it looks like there's like a very like simple way to where you can just like copy paste things and like essentially build one of these things up. So it's like, okay, how do you just solidify that into the contract, really?
Yeah. So like the actual building of these things, I think
relatively
it's
easy.
Yeah, relatively easy, but yeah. But
it's the design
like,
of them
what
that
is
I
the
think is
ethos
not
of
easy.
design?
Yes.
Right.
So there's
like
there's a few things that we sort of see as like projects, I guess. One of them is sort of, it's not a focal point. It will happen like in tandem with what we're doing, which is this, Dave calls it RAD, relationship as design.
RAD?
Yeah.
I'm pleased with that one.
It just sort of like popped out in his notes, and I was like, what is this RAD thing? And like earlier, so we were like dancing around it again, and he's like, ecological design. Oh, he's like, it's that RAD thing. I was like, oh yeah, relationship as design.
Rad as fuck. I love it.
Yeah.
So I
that
think
makes me so happy.
I think that's like something to keep in mind, because like group sense making for how the machinery of this should be designed, how it should come together. It's not like we don't know that, but once we do, like I think we have the technology to build it, is sort of what we're saying. That's a hypothesis.
Yeah,
maybe
it seems
we're
very possible. Yeah. No,
my sense is we don't need a research lab here as much as like a lot of iteration and like playing around with the things that already exist and putting them together in new arrangements.
Different combinations.
No,
so
I agree.
That's like an open sort of project, not a focal point. It should just kind of happen. And part of that, like Dave, who's been doing design work for a long time, would like to talk to people who have been working in the design field just to start bouncing ideas. So that's something we're kind of looking into. But on the technology side, researching what the options are for building this kind of thing, and like, again, talking to people like Sharuz. So it's basically Web3 stuff, and it's possible, I'm not sure about this, but that we would have some sort of like study group to understand it in relationship to this thing. It would be part of, but it's part of the whole vision of this and project of this, but it's like a sub project. So I think it's all like, this is context.
Is that like analyzing like kind of existing technologies and like saying like, okay, does the and how that fits in with the rest of the ethos as well? Like, does it make sense relative to what we're talking about and like things like this?
Exactly.
That would be really cool. That would be so sick.
Like, you could research this on its own, like Web3 stuff, but then to what end? Like, how are you applying it? What are you doing with it? And it's such a big field of play too, so this constrains things in a way. But this is like, I think this is the Taoist. I still haven't read the book or much about this. As you read through the research and start understanding how these things work and designing things, like all of it informs itself. So like, this is where it gets kind of confusing, because the research will change what we are building, which will change the design ethos. So all of that is somehow built in, like that. I don't know like how that happens, how you build an evolution, but that will hopefully be part of what we're building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, part of this is what is there? I think there's a term called I'm gonna get this wrong, agathonic design or something like this, where it's the principle of the design is that the design is bettering itself. And what is that, so like implicit in the structure of the design is that it is sustaining, it is bettering, it is evolving, right? This is the ecological sort of mindset. So are the technologies allowing that, or where are they constraining this kind of mentality, and where is the push and pull between like the engineering pushing the design and the how can you arrange the ethos to get the most out of like where there's all these little sort of principles like what is it, excess is excretion. I think that's a Le Guin quote. Like basically any sort of system that is like operating in excess, it means that it's not very efficient. It's producing all this stuff, but it's hoarding and so how do you create these like right action systems, and what kinds of technologies like work in that mentality where they're extremely elegant and efficient and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is agathonic. I looked it up. Designing objects that improve with use. That's what comes up. Objects specifically.
I guess objects is kind of a broad word, but largely I think nature does this, right? On an evolutionary perspective, but also like, can an idea be an object to some extent? Yes. Can an idea be self-improving? Probably. I feel like this like gets at it pretty deeply.
I think it's the movement from object to process. So like and like holding these things mentally, like the way I've been working with it, which is blunt, but it's process objects. They are these things that are agathonic. They are like making themselves better. And like
it's self-organizing.
It's like a cell. And then what we're trying to build is a multicellular like version. We have like operating systems that work independently. You have one person operating files and you spit them over like a crude network to another person who can do it. And and now we're getting little portals into the future with things like Figma, where you can cohabitate a space, and then but the relationships are not really expressed there. Like the relationship is just like people flat in space. Exactly. So what we're talking about is adding a layer of depth to the entire thing, and then moving through that depth, like with a viewer, with an explorer, like these kinds of concepts in the operating system layer allows you to like see through perspective and then produce your own voice in the thing. So that, and then it relates, and it's just that constant, the game is set to continue like to play. That's why you're designing this thing. You just want to keep going.
Self-perpetuating play.
Nice.
Infinite game.
The last thing, which is sort of a way of somehow capturing all of this, is some kind of white paper, or I don't know if we call it that, but there has to be a better way of talking about this than talking about it, because
because we're like reiterating the same things and like kind of like mashing
and
together.
They're all connected somehow. And like we can do this with you guys because we've been doing this, but like if we went to go sit down with Sharuz, for example, without like all of this, it would take a long time to like get him there. So I mean, anybody, he might be quicker because he's like experimental in his work and he understands technology. But if there's a way to shorthand things so that people can be like, this is cool, I understand, I've got ideas about this, here's a response, like, because the whole thing by design, again, like the being transparent, and then we are trying to be open so that people can self-select in, and the people like some people won't understand any of it, some people will hate it, all of that's good, like it's information. See if
that paper is like a call to play.
What would you call that? Like, is there stuff in like game communities like that's not a white paper? Because the white paper, I mean,
it's like kind of like an invitation. It's kind of like a I, like a white paper gets at it, but yeah, I think like given technology and crypto, it's got like this pretty strong connotation about like this is a physical like thing that we are building, which is not quite so much, but like
We're not there yet.
it's a very close word to that.
No.
Right. This is more of like a call sign. It's like a little like
a beacon
signal. Yeah. Yeah. It's like if you can understand this thing and you are drawn to it, you are probably one of us.
Yeah.
And then the next step here is like sort of creating games to see if that's the case, right?
Yep.
That sort of self-select into play. But yeah, it's sort of the without being like hubristic about it or whatever, like a small token of scene formation. Like here is the field of play as we see it, with a dynamic that you may be able to tie into, and some project structures, and who knows, like the petri dish for a self-organizing system.
Yes.
This is a petri dish.
Yeah, I mean, I watched.
Organizing system.
Yeah, that's what you call it.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I mean, your stuff with Interhack was like a form of this, right? Like, what if it could hang in the frame of this project, right? Where you've got things sectioned off into information management and primitive development and social networking, you know, and personal relation, and as all of these layers coming in, and
but
then relationship to chain funding and all these things. Yeah,
but the very, very earliest one, it doesn't try to define all those things, because those things may be defined by people that see this thing and define them later. So like, it's like inherently sort of collaborative. It's like, so the very, very, I guess, like first thing must be quite like, it's also probably not going to be like 60 pages of text like the typical white paper. I imagine more diagrams and graphs and like cool like little maybe animations, like as multi-dimensional as possible, because like only I might like, there's a current class of person that enjoys downloading 60-page PDFs. I'm not really in that class. There's very few PDFs I will work through, but like an interactive web page that like touches like at a lot of different things that resonate. That's
it's a funnel for now. Like, it should be a distillation of like what we're working with conceptually that is enactable in some way. Like the smallest like surface area of a game that gives you the mental perspective of what we're attempting to, what we are seeing. And we need you as a peer to peer together into this thing.
It's cute.
We only use words that have multiple meanings.
That's all words. I mean, we're making holographic media, so our languaging should be holographic. That's where
I've run into this situation a few times as well. I'm like, I've been talking to Kristen Dave and CJ about some things. They're like, what things? And I'm like,
never mind. I didn't say anything.
It's like, we'd love to talk to you about them too, but like, it's like usually.
But we don't know how. We don't know how to talk about it yet. It's not that we can't talk about it. We're not like under like an NDA, but we're like, I just don't know how.
There's like, this is an impossible conversation to have like with someone. Like I've done this with multiple friends too. I'm like, oh, where do I even start? Like, what do you say? Especially if you're not a technology person, like, how do you begin to explain what's going on?
Well, this should help solve that.
It's been interesting, and like doing the translation with Kristen, because like, I'm technical in a sense, right? Like I know how to design with this stuff, but I don't
pretty technical.
I'm missing like large gaps in my computer science philosophy, and and that's not going to help her anyway. So it's been a good practice of trying to explain in, you know, sort of adaptable terminology, like being able to do this thing bespoke through different lenses to see which lands with, you know, what lands with people. So I think that that's what the core of that little project is it's a like the thing needs to communicate itself, and you know, here's a little playground like for understanding on that. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that works well with us is because we're close and like we've built up like a strong rapport of being able to disagree with each other. And I don't know, like I have a personality tendency when I don't understand something, I just refuse it out of hand. And he knows that, so we can like work with it. But the benefit of that is that anything that he thinks is like in the bag because it makes sense to him for some reason, I'm just like, nah, that doesn't work. And he's just like, what the fuck? And I'm like, you got to explain it differently, because I just like, I'm like, I don't get it. And so it's usually
like you
not that
regenerate
nice.
it.
Yeah.
And
then he's just like, oh my, like, so we have to like work through that. But then if it can stand like that sort of like test of me just poo-pooing everything, and I definitely don't yes man him. I'm just like, I'm more of just like, no, it's not that.
She no man's me.
It works though.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, part of this
working
is
the problem. Like, and
not everything is going to be the right solution.
Yep.
Or the right way to explain or whatever. Most of it's going to be nonsense.
Yeah.
And with trying to express something like this, it is a problem of grammar and linguistics down to the base, because what we're trying to explain requires like a movement of thought in a different direction from the way thought is flowing now. And I think it's a lot more in alignment with the reality that we exist. But you need on-ramps to, it's like picking up a new language, right? This is like when you can think in a language that affords different styles of thinking, then you can ideate in different ways. You can sense into the world in a clearer way for some blah 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 language.
It's interesting. It's interesting, like even like while you're saying that, it just makes me think like even within the white paper, it's like you almost need different on-ramps for different kinds of people. Like you need this multi-perspectival kind of on-ramp for people, and like we each all have a view of what this is and maybe like main points or stuff like that, but it's like, how do you like digest that into someone? Like if someone doesn't understand technology at all versus has like web 3.0 knowledge, like the Shrews, is like, how do you explain this to these different people and like be conscious of that and like understand that people are coming at this from different perspectives, and you're like, oh, this is the perspective that most closely matches me. And then even being like, okay, well, since that perspective closely matches me, here's how I can contribute to that perspective, because here's the things in that I didn't understand too.
Yes. Yeah.
And then how can you translate it between the perspectives? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, this artifact that we're talking about is like the first holographic artifact.
It is.
It's some web, video, audio, contextual perspectival thing. Yeah. Which, we can create a little.
I have a not a visual, but like a felt sense of the experience of being in like an airport or something where they're just saying things in different languages, the same thing over and over again. Like, oh my God. Yeah. A fun one.
Yeah. Yes. I think the languages one is
welcome and bienvenue. Like you're just like, you get the pattern of it. You're like, okay, like, and you can start like, and things like that too, those words. Like I'm reciting them. I know what they mean. Yeah. Similar effect.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's of course like the icon, like the pictography that also works for people that like don't fit into that class or just need something visual, like
Yep.
you know,
It's like I mean like the pictography thing, I was like, oh wow, like we're so great. Well, in the sense like humans are so great at like creating like these different perspectives out in the real world. Like how has that not been quite reflected onto the internet in the same way? Like we haven't in some ways, right? But yeah, like seeing a sign, you're like, oh, a right arrow, and you're like, I know what's going on, or like a bathroom sign, you're like, oh, that's a bathroom. It doesn't matter what language it's in. But
on the internet, it feels like emojis are coming to this place, but not like at all universal enough. I mean, first of all, there's a committee. Committees make things difficult, and like they're much more about like particular like emotions and things and like things in the world rather than like deeper meanings and intentions and like conflicts. Like it feels like we need a set of emojis that are like almost like more universal in some sense, even though emojis are already universal, but yeah, not quite in that way.
I think that there's some concept here of context, like which can then like orient you to how to interpret emoji or symbol, right? You know, so this is the like there's a setup implicit in the artifact that is you're moving from perspective, and the perspectives are something that you can try on and like right, like okay, we'll see if this one fits, this one feels right, and this one is related in genre or you know whatever relationship to this other one, so you can make a lateral move. This is where I like on YouTube or even this, right? Like if somebody were to watch this back and they would see how we bring in these different perspectives and they overlap or don't, or they have tensions or don't, in looking at the relationship between perspective, like, and how they interface with each other, you can sort of transcode the thing. But that's a movement. You have to actively engage with the information. You cannot consume it. Like you have to converse with it. Like, and so the style of the media is conversational. It is dialogical, not monological, dialogical. So this is the difference between, you know, some texts and this thing, this thing with the billion faces. That was nice. I didn't know that was me. That felt good.
Wow. I know that just like mind fucked the shit out of me.
Dialogical was a word, but
I know. I had to say it was like, ooh, dialogical.
I picked that up,
like, especially in the context of not monologue. You're like, oh shit! It was basically a monologue. What the fuck?
That distinction comes from a philosopher named, I think, Thomas. I forget his name. They're doing a WeSpace project, and he's like a Heideggerian philosopher, and he has a partner who I think is a clinical psychologist, maybe, and they've got a big project that they're working on. Doing collective sense making and intelligence. So I borrowed that. I just used it. Anyways.
Well, it's nice.
There are people out there doing this stuff is the point. Yeah.
Well, this is the same, like, so, I mean, it's all the same pattern of if you understand, like, just even if it's a different language, like the word welcome, if you understand your own perspective in a certain context and then someone else is in the same context, so like the gameplay, so if people are playing the same game, so there's like, we started talking about like onboarding stuff for like the community, like social network layer of this. I think it's a little too soon for it, but not quite. But everyone needs to play the same games in the beginning, because then you know where everyone's coming from. Because if you've played it and then someone else plays it and you can see what they're doing, you're like, oh, okay, weird. Like John thinks like that, CJ thinks like that, Dave thinks okay, and you're like, that's how they feel about the way that I feel, like on the same wavelength. Like that's cool. That's like the Yeah, what is that?
This is our proof of play.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, basically, yeah, like proof of play. I mean, in going through this stuff, you sort of create, because like it's clear that like when a group of people comes into play with each other, like everybody is bringing their own perspectives, but how do you like show those perspectives, right? You need like a backboard, you need some medium, something, and so like this is just the very first layer where, you know, you're sort of going through this thing and then leaving like little bubbles in your wake, but those bubbles like show like what you did and who you are, and the proof of play. That's good.
Yeah.
Lateral thinking, is that like we're teaching that sort of, but with other people?
Maybe. Yeah. Sure. I mean, I think that the byproduct of that is like the multiperspectival thing is by nature lateral, because when you are seeing the relationship to how people see the world, and then you can like interface with that relationship and your perspective, then you are moving laterally, like we do it naturally. So this is just providing an environment to do that. You are not specialized. You are not, you know, in a tunnel or in a silo. Somebody had another phrase for this, from like silo to combo or something like this.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What is?
From silo to combo.
Oh, from the silo to the combine? What's combo? Just combo?
Well, I kind of get it as a combination.
Yeah.
Yeah, but combine could have a play in there as well, possibly.
Sure.
I don't know.
Anyhow, it's a sketch.
Yeah,
I understood it.
That's what counts.
I think the proof of play is really interesting too, because it potentially allows like the show of change in perspective over time, which I feel like is something that we don't have that much of today. Where you're like, here's this thing from 20 years ago that this person did. Look how terrible of a person they are. You're like, well, you know, like perspectives change over time, and like that's part of life. And if we all stayed static from now onwards, we would be pretty terrible human beings.
We'd be dead. So humanity would be dead.
Yeah. Our species would be ended like very, very quickly. So it's like
this is
a very like natural thing.
The chain aspect of this is interesting because then you can see lineage of growth, which is proof of like work. Like
it is.
Not proof of work is not the right, but it's something lateral to that.
Effort.
Yeah. Well, you can't teach that too.
In those perspectives.
Yeah, you can't.
You're endeavoring
from doing all of these things, and like, I mean, this also should help people root out blind spots in theory then, because it's like if you're just circling the drain on something, even if you don't see it, someone else is like, man, you're just like you're always coming to the same conclusion, like maybe there's something else here, like, and there's probably games for that, like how do you pop out of when you get stuck somewhere.
Well, this is where go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it was just one more thing in addition to the lineage aspect. I also find the like context very interesting. Like an excerpt in Wall Street Journal is just that. It's like, you know, 5 sentences from something that somebody wrote. If you go to the medium in which that was created, and it has all these other associations around like the games that were played and the other people that were there in that moment, and also like geography, I don't know, whatever else like possibly can be, you know, it like paint a more complete picture. Like it might not make you go, oh no, never mind, that's fine, but it makes you go I understand it. I understand that deeper now. So
the movement of that information is information. The relationships there can give you a perspective on how this was produced, where this is coming from. Because you can't take it
isolation then.
No.
Yeah, that's an interesting, like, this person's a horrible person, look what they're thinking. And then you're like, but go out even just 1 degree of relationship and everyone around them is saying the same thing. So, or like half of them are,
or were they saying
look at the
something
last game they
in
played.
a different way?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, this also ideally, the style of game here will afford a few things. One, there's a developmental arc to the play, in that like there are certain games that require like what is the word, earlier understandings to develop, right? Like, so prerequisites, and the prerequisites are built into the game. If you can't do the thing, you can't do the thing. So you have to like, you'll hit an upper limit, but then knowing that you're hitting that upper limit somehow because you're playing with other people who might be more advanced in play, right, can give you an idea of where to move and in what direction. There's something else in there, but yeah, anyways, I don't know. The developmental angle on this, I think, is super important.
Yeah. I think timescales could be days or years.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like, and there is no definite, and like it, like the most probably going to be some explicit like prerequisites, but also like I almost feel like a lot of them will be implicit and just like soft in the sense that it's not like there's a red pop-up error that yells at you. It's more like to engage fully, you just have had to do these other things that are kind of related and connected and just naturally.
Yeah, you can try. And that's the thing though, the like cadence or pace of a certain thing, right? Like, so say for instance, like you're going to do a thing where you are going to show up in relationship with people like once a day and it is going to be to a level of vulnerability that needs to be, you have to have had journaled for a while or meditated for a while or whatever. And if you try to do this, it's just not going to feel great. Like you're not going to want to come back. Like it's sort of implicit in the style of play. And for people who are at that level of development in these particular practices, it's fun. Like it's challenging. You're stretching yourself in a way that is moving you forward. So this is, and recognizing that this is the case, like knowing that you are a person who can develop, and that these games are being designed in such a way to afford healthy development. That doesn't mean that you have to design it in the way. This is where the design ethos comes in. Like, how are you designing these things, and how are you showing up to produce these games for people who may be playing them for a long time? Like, where I hope you're playing them too, right?
The agathonic design makes sense. Like that's inherently baked in, because if you want people to be growing and evolving, then the system itself has to be evolving.
Because everything is changing around it, so it needs to have an evolutionary component to it. It needs to complexify in relationship to environment. All this sounds very fun.
I was thinking that. I was just gonna say this is fun.
Yeah.
What else do you want to work on? Come on.
Pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
CJ.
No, I mean, it's just like, I don't know. Sometimes I just sit and listen. I'm just like, oh man, my mind is just being like totally like destroyed this whole time. And it's also like I've been thinking these same things, but words are like actually like coming out of y'all's mouth. I'm like, oh wow, like these are the words to describe my thoughts. Like, oh man, okay.
There's resonance.
And
awesome.
I don't know, like that, like specifically like that evolutionary component of it is thinking about like a system that does kind of grow and is self-organizing in this way. It is very like it does feel very similar to like proper nature and like how things are supposed to be, rather than like shoehorning into a system. It's like you'll see emergences of evolution in a lot of systems that we have today, but this is more like from the core base. The evolution like seems to be like that base of relationship in a way, like even at like I imagine at the cellular level. I mean, how did we get to multicellular organisms? I mean, that's a question I don't know the answer to. I really want to know the answer to. but at some point these cells are communicating somehow with each other. Our neurons are certainly communicating with each other. Like all these things are communicating somehow. So that like communication and relationship seems like so vital to this. And like, I don't know, like the mutual understanding between these things is like totally just like, I don't know.
I mean,
like, it just makes sense.
I think that's a perfect frame to like look at the technology through, right? Like the biological. How are these like self-organizing systems communicating, forming, evolving, and like how can you represent this in software? There are design principles sitting right there, and all this science that is sitting right there that can be like moved over into practice, like into practical like expression in like relational software. But yeah, we need translators for all this stuff because all the information is sitting out there, I think, and they're in people's brains who are actively working on this stuff.
Yeah, and it is like getting those perspectives that like currently we don't have, where we have just like this like computer perspective, but we kind of know like it's that like sensing is like we're sensing into like we've heard a little bit about these things and like you can feel like that makes sense, like it feels like that is a thing.
Yeah, this is why this
thing bring in and
exactly like that is why this project is so fundamental, because if you can get these, if you can like have a communication stratum to have these complex mentalities talk to each other and be shared and enacted, then the amount of stuff that you can do and the way that you can like the upgrade in seeing the world is enormous. Even if you do just a lo-fi version of this thing, which, you know, that's what it'll be at first.
That's how it starts.
Naturally, that's how it starts.
Yep.
I'm just thinking about
got to build our single cell.
Yeah, how cells went from single to multi. And there's some of it where like one cell would literally subsume the other one, like it like takes it in. And you'll see that like, so mitochondria have different DNA than we do. And it's all maternal lineage. It's really interesting. And I'm thinking like, why the fuck is that? Like, why did it maintain its own DNA structure? That's weird. Yeah, but I don't think all cells and like structures within cells too, like this is, I mean, it was like very primitive in the beginning, right? So like one cell did this and another cell did that, and they're like, well, if we just come to like, if we merge and both do that, but they had to communicate in the beginning, right? So at first they're probably kind of working together, and then they're like, well, what if we just combine? Like it was probably not accidental, but like it just happens, and it was like, oh, well, this is more advantageous, so let's just do this now.
Yeah, because was it like mitochondria must have existed independently of like the rest of the cell? Like how did this, like I guess it begs the question to me is like, how is a cell as we know it emerged? Because it has so many like, I forget what they call them, like organelles. Like how did the organelles within the cells actually emerge too? Like were those like the whole thing is just like a little bit.
Not everything was its own organism, right? Like so at some point,
or I mean, or was it? And it kind of did do the whole subsuming thing, and like how did that happen? I just lost.
I mean, people study this full time, right? They're just geeking out on it.
Yeah.
I need to go talk to my bio friends. They'll probably tell me something.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, part of this is you have like, this is where these constraints or these projects help. Like, all right, I am trying to see something in terms of this constraint, right? Like in this case, you know, I am trying to apply the biological to software development. And so I need to understand the flows of these things in relationship to building principles, right? So like help me work within this space and that we can play or these kinds of things. So like part of this is like elegant constraint design so that you can narrow the field of play so that you're not constantly bombarded. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, like you don't need to go like so super in depth, because like once you're going that far, it's not actually helping you understand the picture relative to the computer domain anymore. Is like that now you're just trying to understand like the fundamentals of biology, which is interesting in and of itself for some.
It's like gene expression and just like getting into some crazy DNA thing. It's like, whoa, we've gone too far. Like, it's like fascinating, but like I'm out of my depth.
Maybe I'll listen to a 30-minute podcast on that. Maybe not. Like I don't need that for the context of this.
Yeah.
Or even having you and a biologist talk and like between your mediums and like do the translation is enough that a third party or fourth party or whatever can look at this and be like, this is what I hear you saying. And then this is where the annotation layer comes in, and you're like, and then there's a source that has already covered that. And then you just go to that source and they're talking about the philosophy of biological computer design or whatever the hell. Like, and so it cuts the number of hops to finding source, like, because somebody is working on these things almost certainly. And then if not, then great, you found indirectly new territory. That's rad. So and that's relationship
and
as
it's already
design.
linked to its
Sorry,
I want to do this with thermodynamics. I want to understand. It's, do you know someone?
I have a friend who's getting a PhD in physics. I don't know, he's not specifically studying thermodynamics, but I think he has a high level understanding of thermodynamics, probably better than all of us would be my guess.
Yeah.
There's something in thermodynamics that explains like the engine of a lot of this stuff that Dave and I both arrived at independently and like lost our minds. Like we're like, the answer to everything is here. And like each of us, like when the other one went like through it, we're like, what are you talking about? And then we're like, oh, it's the same thing. Like what?
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this is so like the media ecology stuff from Marshall McLuhan talks a lot about like the development of technologies and medias. Those are the same thing, like, you know, clothes are a media, software is a media, TV is a media, broadcast. And there are all these laws that go with them that he sort of developed. But one of the characteristics of a media is that a newer media will use the content or is that it? The content from the previous media as its substance. And it is, new medias are transcendent in the sense that they use everything from before as their like, and grow, they subsume it all, right? So you have things like TV taking in Broadway plays and pointing a camera at them, right? And then there are new expressions of like temporality or whatever available in the new media. So blockchain is eating everything. And so it is going to rejigger everything in its image because this is how these medias work. And it is a step, it's huge. Like it rejiggers all of the stuff. So we get different social relations, different, you know, and they'll be expressed out through that Web3 thing. So, but that I think is related to how like the cellular stuff works. Like there's probably, you know, it's a fractal of that thing because we're just enacting our evolution outward through our tools or something.
Literally.
Yeah, Dave, I think you're going on about this. So I was like, oh, blockchain and media. I haven't like really totally thought of it in this perspective. I guess like NFTs in a way, but I don't know. I would just listen to you for like a half hour, an hour just on that subject for sure.
I think it's
I
rad.
Did not think about the media transition at all in that sense, but yes, like it has to be flexible enough to support all the previous functions as well as add like a bunch of new functions essentially. And what those new functions are probably gonna be pretty freaking crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna be these emergent, weird, who knows? Like, but I think they do have this nature of this like holographic thing that we are having to, the four of us, cobble together with all of our brain power to make one of them, right? But as soon as we can figure out the pattern of how these things work, then we can create a pre-press public. Like this is what the printing press for these things looks like, right? And if you can build a printing press for these, people can build the types of media that come through the printing press. And it's not just text. That's the thing that a lot of these like Rome's, and Rome is not so much, but like Obsidian and these other like note-taking thing, they're over-indexed on text. Like they need to be multimedia and multi-surface and multi-depth. So yeah.
Yep.
CJ jumped out of a window.
I think that was the summation of every rant that I probably have ever had, because I'm just like, I'm like, I want this in Rome, but it doesn't exist natively, and I'm going to cry.
Like it doesn't fit into Rome. It doesn't fit into Apple Notes. It doesn't fit into any of these like stupid apps.
But you can wedge them in, but it's so much work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like often rasterizes them into a layer that's like not as useful and true, and
yeah, they're not in their native form, and they can't be related to because they're a facsimile of something, right? They are a representation of something. And like text is we have the most experience with text production because that psychotechnology came first, right? In a mass produced method. Then later on, we got images and design but we're at the place now where text is still the most easily manipulatable, which is why it was first. But we can have like symbolic structure across media type, and that they can relate to each other too.
Really matter. So it's just it's a relationship between anything. It doesn't matter what that thing is. It just is a thing.
And the primary the primary media environment that we had before was the book, was text. And the ecosystem that came up around that was the educational system, university system, academia, all, religion, all of this stuff was rejiggered around us. We have the internet now as the information landscape that we're swimming in, which is by nature a graph. It's a network, right? So the media types that come from that, the artifacts should be represented, in the water that we're swimming in
natively.
Right? So
is everything not a URL?
Cool.
I mean,
kind of.
You got IRLs and URLs. Yeah, I don't know. I need you to unpack that. I've got too much of a understanding of URLs in a simplistic thing. Probably.
I guess I wrote a lot of notes, so it comes back to something I wrote earlier when you were talking about graph DBs, and then we got onto other conversations. I've kind of explored graph DBs before, and kind of within the same context, and I've always been very frustrated by them because I'm always trying to define these arbitrary relationships, and they're trying to enforce a schema on me. And now I'm now I have to build a schema, and a schema is not what I need here. That's not going to help. It's very helpful for querying, but in terms of maintaining something in a big distributed open source way, it seems are you going to define one schema for everything? That does not seem very sustainable either. That doesn't seem quite right to me. It seems very unnatural. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. That's one of the problems. And there's how do you decide on that schema and everything? But at least one thing that the web has done is it's very easy to relate between URLs, but at some level, all we need to do, Google maintains a database of backlinks. In a way, this is kind of the same thing, just between media. And if we can just say, create new media related to this thing under this relationship title, well, that's a very simple schema that can be enforced. And maybe it's not quite as queryable, but maybe there's other hyperparameters to the relationship itself that actually makes it queryable. So now you're querying on the relationship, how the relationship is defined, as opposed to the content, how it's defined.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
but it was
Yes.
kind of a thought that I
And
had
the
before.
relationships are cheap and plentiful. And so you can
Yes.
compose queries that move through relationship indirectly. Like this is like, I don't have much more of an understanding than that felt sense. This is where my technical knowledge falls off a cliff. But yeah, you start from a piece of just a place, and then you move out from that place, right?
Yes.
Like, and you can move out in different directions, rejiggering your sense making, right?
Yes.
Like with queries, and you should be able to compose these queries on the fly and adapt them to get different lenses. And like Dave's files is a query, right? Like, look, show them all, right? And whatever, anyways, yeah, that's how I was thinking about this.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
There's
I need to understand
some-
more of this.
Well, yeah, just the fact that URLs are pretty. They're not a lot of data like in and of themselves. It's just like a string of text. But if if the source of these URLs is still active, then over time, like the thing that is maintaining that relation can go to that URL and pull out as much metadata as needed. Other people can add metadata to that URL. Like they're not they're static, but they're like they can be expanded almost in some sense, like because it's not like you're taking a screenshot of something and then now you're owning this thing. It's more like it's just a pointer, but the thing that it's pointing to is actually very rich, and some of that can be taken back and applied to the URL basically. Don't know if that quite sums it up, but it feels like in this context URLs are not quite as dangerous. Like right now on the internet, URLs are very, very dangerous. You point to it today, it might not be there tomorrow, and there's no guarantee that what you pointed to is actually like the thing that you thought it pointed to.
This is where IPFS really comes into
exactly
handy here.
Yeah, the
where you
chain.
have
Yep.
more of a bookmark, like a real like I point to this thing
Yep.
today in this reality, and then like it's a stronger like it's a link that gets healthier with time instead of like potentially dying.
Yes.
Yeah, and the layer that processed that sort of encoded that URL like can disappear, but the byproduct of the processing can be around, and then ideally you can remake it, and it works with another layer of processing. You can rebuild it from scratch because the instructions are out there. Maybe to the degree that anything is possible to do that after encoding, but yeah, there's more information so that you don't lose context.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
To some degree.
It's making more sense.
Yeah, I think it's still like I'm like thinking about it too. I'm like, still a little too vague. But
Yeah,
it's getting closer.
One of the things I was watching recently was a talk given by one of the Neo4j like evangelist guys, and like how these queries are sort of built in cipher, I guess is the language. And that like sort of visual representation of queries, like it's like ASCII for queries, where it's like pretty legible, I think, even to somebody like me.
Interesting.
So I don't know if there is some relationship to what we're talking about and URLs, because it's sort of like there's something in here that is sparking, but I don't know what it is. But yeah, he was explaining it to a group of but
I was just gonna say, it's interesting you mentioned it was like you thought it was pretty legible. I kind of thought it was like opposite. It was like I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Interesting.
Which is strange. Maybe I'm just coming from a different perspective of like I know how certain systems work, and it was like hard for me to like, translate that into this thing. Yeah, you don't, so it was probably easier, which is interesting.
I'm gonna send you this video. I think
now it makes me want to give it. Yeah, send me.
He is explaining it to like it's like a Microsoft's open learning whatever thing, and it's a bunch of like database engineers, data engineers, like who have been working probably for 30 years in SQL or whatever, and he is having to do the conversion on why it's important and why it's interesting and what it can do, and these guys are real. They're nailing him to the wall. So it's good.
Yeah.
I'll send you.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah,
I'll
please.
check it out.
Yeah.
Drop in the chat.
It's a long 2 hours, but it's useful.
Oh well.
2 hours.
Oh wow, that's solid. That's a long one.
What I found was really nice was I can listen to these things, but if I look at the code and if I watch him like do the visuals, like I'm just listening for the patterns. Like you guys can read source a lot better than I can. But you know, he's sort of explaining through analogy, like how the structures are working and how you can move through them. And then he has enough of a fluency in the language that like people can throw out problems. And he's like, somebody has like some server, like it needs to do a bunch of jobs and, you know, figure out where there's a blockage in flow. And he's like, okay, here's how you model that. So it's cool in that sense. But most of the problems that they're trying to solve are so boring. They're just like, so I'm like, you could do so much cooler shit with this. Like, yeah, anyways. So I'd be interested to see if you get anything out of it.
Certainly. Yeah, I would love to give it a view. I never got too deep into Neo4j or any of the graph databases because they just like exploded my mind. I was like, I can't fit my model of like how I want this to work into how it does work, and like no database was encapsulating that properly for me at the time. So I'm curious to see like, or at least like deeply, and I never went like deeply into it, at least not enough to listen to a 2-hour talk. So that would be, I think it would be very helpful to gain that real perspective of like how someone could operate in that environment and how it works.
Yeah, I mean, it was the unlock for me to understand how a relational OS could work at all. Like it is the base level architecture, and I'm sure that there are relational database principles in here where you have stuff that's in a place that you know and it's not going anywhere, so there's a speed increase and blah blah blah, all that. But there is a type of thing that these graph databases do that allows for a type of querying that is like really interesting. Yeah, and anyhow,
totally.
I'm stoked to talk about this after you guys watch this stuff.
Where should we keep this kind of stuff? So like, this is part of like the study, you know, like
it's a perfect first example.
Yeah, so we should the actual content then, and then whatever responses. There's no like official game here, but CJ watches it, he uploads his notes, John watches it, he talks about it with someone, uploads that video, like whatever, you know. Where do we save this for now?
Yeah,
that's not a pain in the like.
I mean, it could be just another section on the site that's like bookshelf or something, you know, like a little links to PDFs would work just the same way, like links to services that we find that like look interesting, and then, you know, whatever. I guess the base post type could just really just be like dates added by, and you know, the thing it points to, and then whatever else fits into Markdown into that.
I'm game. I mean, the other option, the only other option I can think that would work at all right now is Notion, where it's got a GUI, because nothing else is probably strong enough to do what we're trying to do multimedia wise. The only reason that I mention this, because I would prefer to build the site, but I think it's going to be a blocker. Because
I don't want to spend time doing it.
Yeah, Kristen is going to be able to do a lot of curation on this thing, and she's native in Notion. And if we have other people, we can train them up until we have like a layer that we can build that does this. But the pros and cons here.
Unofficial. It's pretty fully fleshed out for Python.
Oh, I thought they might have introduced the real one. Okay.
Not that I know of. It's the this guy that they've been telling everybody.
Yeah, beta. Okay. Anyway.
Oh, it's beta now.
I thought I saw something about it a while back. So
what were you?
I was just thinking because that could be a good option.
CJ asked if Notion has an API, and then I guess like my thoughts on Notion generally. I like it. the only like thing that scares me about Notion is how much of it feels very much like this opaque file system that
Oh
it's
yeah.
so hard to understand, like that this one node like leads to 16 others.
Yeah.
And the last time I was there was only two in there, and now there's 16, and like I didn't really get notified about them. I don't have a way of saying show me all the things. Like, I mean, truly, Rome doesn't really have a solution for this either.
Yeah.
You could do some stuff with queries, but it's gonna break my brain. Um, something about Git I really like, in the sense that I could like
Sure.
catch up to it and just see. But that's really the only positive I see in terms of Git over Notion.
Let's use Git and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think we just need to legibilize these processes, like just get them into a form that we agree to, and then we're going to put this here and then and then have some discipline about it until we can automate out the need for discipline. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I prefer doing it that way because we're building it, and the frictions we're going to feel them directly because we're not mitigating it through another thing. So yeah, I need to work on my laziness on this front. So
me too. I really need to like read up on 11T.
Yeah, I mean, you'll understand
it'll
in
take
3 seconds.
I know, I'm sure it'll be really fast as soon as I do, and I'm like, okay, here's how it goes.
Yep. I mean, if there's a thing here where we start from scratch and all have an agreement on a platform that like has a fluency, like I'll learn whatever. So it's if that helps us like activate
everything
the thing somehow,
so it's fine.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, that's like totally
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I did some amount of research on the 11D thing because the reason I like it is because people from different areas can sort of just toss whatever in there and it'll basically render the thing. So
from what I've seen so far, it does very versatile and light, which is pretty much the best of both.
And open, and the people who are building it seem cool.
And I use Hugo for my main site, but it's a little heavy. It's like at times you're really just like, really, like you can't parse this, like come on, like 11D was surprising in terms of some of the meta stuff baked into it. So no complaints here.
I think part of this is like if we can come up with some basic structure to projectize things, like we need a flow for this, and then then we have a constraint, and then we can go in and do our best minimal version of that thing, and then check it off and then try it. Because if we keep sensing, I mean, this is back where Kristen and I are talking about, I mean, we're going to do this thing full time. So we need to start structuring our time around working on this type of stuff, and coordinating and all this. And that's, I'm out of my area of expertise by a country mile here. So anyways,
couldn't think of two better people to start it.
I mean, thank you.
We're the only people crazy enough to cook it up, so I think for the library for now, the easiest way to do it is just to have a library or bookshelf, whatever we want to call it, and then you just add a page for each piece of content, and then anyone who wants to add to their response or whatever, they just add to it under maybe their name.
If it's
DJ
super
thoughts,
long, then it could just be another file, but otherwise just throw it in line and
something else.
I can be the dummy in the system. Is there a thing I can read to know what to do? Because I don't know. Then I can follow instructions.
Instructions are great.
All right. I mean, okay. Where to from here?
I still need to put all the game stuff that we're doing on the site. I've been I don't know what happened.
I no same. I have a backlog of things that I want to get onto the site and kind of really button up, and frankly I haven't posted to my blog in 2 months, and at this point I'm just well, I guess we'll post when we do. 0 words are getting output per right now, and I'm
Yeah.
It's like, like when I think about, do I want to write for my blog for this like amorphous blob of like hundreds of potential people all over the internet, or do I want to write for like 10 people? Like honestly, time and time again, I just so much rather write for the 10 because there's just so much less explanations involved and like risks. So yeah, the more I could write for here, like this is basically like what I want to like think about, you know. And this is why I've tried to write things to the open world, but like this, I kind of feel like this is it. This is
I like that. I mean, I'm in the same boat. I don't want to go build another stupid site. I've had like 50 sites, and then I've had the same thing happen over and over again. I build an audience, and then I'll use Tumblr site, and then I'll use Twitter, and then I'm like, why am I? It's fine, you know. Like I'd prefer to be in a group of people like doing this. This is the content that we're producing, right? This is fun. I can do this all the time. So these are a post type, and then these can go into a feed, and then people can look at them and comment on them and do whatever, right? Like this. And this style of like voice noting or whatever is like a style of audio writing, and I like it because it's conversational. Sitting and writing a piece by myself just does not seem very fun anymore. For now, you know, that'll change, but you know, so and then this is where like there's another layer of this thing where we can play content games, right? Like where we get together and we choose to write posts together in some format or however, or compose them, you know, individually, and then come together and then have that be like have a publishing thing, right? And then that's a lot easier than sitting by yourself and then trying to organize your thoughts into some, you know, coherence for an audience that's out there, right? So anyways,
100%.
That gives me a lot more motivation to clean up the site because, you know, that's fun. Cool.
I just like the descriptions we have on the site for everybody. So Dave is a multispectral dodecahedron. Which is fine. CJ is a circular square. John is a curious wanderer, and I'm some manner of land witch. It's all ridiculous.
All over the place.
Hi, and
it's our LinkedIn.
Both of the links on mine are broken because I changed my Twitter handle and my website doesn't exist, so it's really good. Try to find me, you can't.
That's great. I also adore how like messy it is, because it's just you know like it's not trying to fit some ideal like web standard, you know, like for completeness and it's just like the collaborative brain thoughts made digital, and that's it.
And I think as our thoughts cohere and become legible, the site will
start.
Just naturally.
That's fun. I mean, I think it's a good health measure of like where we're at in our collaboration, at least on that front, right? Because this is we're cohering here in this media. Like if you know these like broader artifacts that we're talking about that have more complexity, if they're starting to stick together in a way that like feels fluid, we're doing something right.
Yeah, it's just
there's your metric.
A display of coherence outwardly as opposed to inwardly, where we're like, we know we are cohering right now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's printing out into the world.
Anyway, I think I need to start moving on because I'm climbing in like 10 minutes.
Nice.
It's a good thing to do after this.
You gotta eat before you go too, probably.
Go get it moved out. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I'll send you guys Microsoft videos.
Please.
Yeah. Fun as usual.
Perfect. Looking forward. Yeah, and then I guess just loosely, like I don't know if we officially got to like Frame.io thing, but I almost kind of wouldn't mind like because there's some comments there that I like do really actually want to address, and we touched on some of them, so that might be like the subject for next call whenever that is. But yeah, definitely want to loop back there at some point.
I feel like it sort of it's a good jumping off point too. Like there's a lot of depth in there, which is cool.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. There's
Yep.
quite a few different branches. So,
Well,
yep.
I think also as an artifact, it's one of our it's like just proof that this works.
Yes.
Like we just moved into this media and then we picked it
was
up
just
and
so easy. It
let's
just
go
felt
do
so
another
natural.
one that's
Yep.
great.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah.
Very surprised.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well,
thanks guys.
enjoy the rest of the Mondays.
Good to see you guys.
Yes.
Take care.
Bye.
Arrivederci.
Bye.